welcome to WhalePool.
Hey Roger, it's Gavin. I sleuth in here for trading, so I heard about this.
Hey Roger.
Hey Gavin, nice to hear your voice again. Hey Eric, I see lots of familiar names in here.
Hey Roger, finally good to hear you. Could put a voice to my trollish name.
Who was that though? There were so many people in the channel that I don't know whose voice that was.
Mr. Hodel.
Hello, Mr. Hodel. Yeah, thank you for helping organize this, by the way.
No problem. Alright, so you wanna get a starter shot?
Yeah, we're ready to go. All right, so here in the WhalePool TeamSpeak, we have Eric Lombrozo, who is a developer and has committed code to Bitcoin Core. We also have Roger Ver. Eric, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Eric Lombrozo, and I'm a founder and CEO of Cypherx Corp, and I've also been a longtime contributor to Bitcoin Core. I've been into Bitcoin for since 2011, and yeah, just looking to build really cool stuff with it.
Thank you. And Roger, could you just give us 2 minutes on you?
Sure, I'm the first person in the world to start investing in Bitcoin startups and also been involved in Bitcoin for 6 years now, and currently CEO of Bitcoin.com.
All right. I want to start with some grammar. Eric, can you please tell us what a hard fork is exactly?
Yeah, so a hard fork is a change in consensus rules. So the consensus rules are the rules that all the different nodes on the network that validate blocks have to check to make sure that it conforms to the protocol. And a hard fork changes those in a way where blocks that used to be invalid now become valid. What that means is that some nodes are going to agree, are not going to agree with other nodes as far as whether a particular block is valid. And unless everyone follows the same hard fork, that means that it's most likely going to result in multiple blockchains splitting from the original blockchain. So with hard forks, you don't get the guarantee of convergence that you do with Satoshi consensus as it's designed.
All right. Oh, just to also mention, we do have Alex Petrov in the chat. Alex, are you there? While he works on his mic, we'll keep going. And can you please describe what a soft fork is for us, Eric?
A soft fork is a change in consensus rules that only makes the rules more strict. So what that means is that old nodes are still going to consider the blocks valid, but new nodes are going to add new rules. So new nodes might now consider a block invalid that old nodes would consider valid, but this does not lead to the same problem because now as long as a sufficient hash power, and this is something that miners can actually enforce, whereas the hard fork is something that miners cannot enforce. Soft forks are something that as long as a majority hash rate supports it and actually enforces that rule, that actually ensures that the entire network will eventually converge on a consistent ledger that is going to be following the new rules.
Okay, thank you. Roger, could you please describe what you mean by economic code when you describe that current development trends are not moving along the same economic code that was started?
Sure, so when I first heard about Bitcoin, I started reading about it. And before that, my hobby had been studying economics. And in order for something to become money and useful as money, it has to have certain characteristics. And Bitcoin had those characteristics better than any other money that had ever come along ever before. And I knew for sure Bitcoin was going to become, people were going to start using it as money, and it was going to become really, really popular to be used as money. And that's what inspired me to buy a bunch of Bitcoins and then start investing in these Bitcoin startups, because I knew people were going to start using it as money, and it was just so incredibly clear. And not to get too terribly sidetracked, but I think I had a really, really unique opportunity to really be able to see that more clearly than other people. So as a hobby, I'd been studying economics, and there's a particular thing called Mises's regression theorem, which basically explains how something becomes money and how it first has to be a medium of exchange, and then it becomes money, and then the store of value as well from there. And it has to be a commodity to begin with. And I read all these theories in books, and they seemed convincing, and I believed it. And for those that don't know already, it might be a surprise, but I spent some time in federal prison in the U.S. for a victimless crime. And while I was in federal prison, though, I got to see right before my eyes the prison economy forming. And I got to see how people started making their own money and using their own money within the prison. And I got to see right before my eyes how within the prison economy, the theories that I had read about in the books were exactly right. And in practice, the theory matched up exactly with what people were actually doing in the real world. And then when I saw Bitcoin, I realized that, hey, people, this lines up exactly right with the theory of where money comes from and what people, what characteristics it needs to have in order for people to start using it as money. So I knew, because I saw in the prison economy that the theories were true, and then I knew it was going to be true with Bitcoin too. So, and the thing that has me so concerned about Bitcoin at the moment is that underlying economic code and those characteristics that make Bitcoin useful as money and that make Bitcoin popular by people all over the world, those characteristics are being undermined and altered and damaged by the current network congestion. And if that damage becomes too severe, people are going to stop using Bitcoin as money, or people are going to switch to something else, or Bitcoin won't gain as much of a market share for being used as money as it otherwise would have been. So we have an 8-year track record of knowing exactly what these characteristics are that have made Bitcoin incredibly popular and adopted by people all over the world to be used. We don't want to change those characteristics because we know for sure that they work. They've been working for 8 years. We have an 8-year track record. Don't change those. Don't break those. Don't damage those. Otherwise, we risk damaging and breaking the entire Bitcoin ecosystem and losing momentum and losing out to some other currency, because Bitcoin, it's not only competing against the dollar and the euro and the yen, but it's competing against every other cryptocurrency and everything else. So we want Bitcoin to be the fastest, safest, cheapest, most secure, most censorship resistant payment system that we possibly can, so that Bitcoin can, if we're all on Team Bitcoin, we want Bitcoin to win in the end. So we need to make Bitcoin the absolute best Bitcoin we possibly can. So sorry for a slightly long-winded answer, but that's what I'm referring to in regards to the underlying economic code of Bitcoin.
Okay. Alex, are you there? Phil, are you there? PGP.
I am here.
Okay, can you please introduce yourself as a latecomer?
Yeah, I'm Phil Potter. Hi Roger. Hi Alex. Hi Eric.
Phil.
How you guys doing? Is everyone's
Hey
good?
Phil, thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm the chief strategy officer at Bitfinex. We've been having a pretty rough go of it lately, but we're in recovery mode, and that's going along pretty well. But I'm in the I'm a Bitcoin enthusiast myself, and I've been quite passionate on the topics of Bitcoin's future as well. And I think the other co-participants here have heard me talk about this, or I've spoken with them individually about this at length. Yeah. So, is there, Shot? Was there a particular question you wanted me to ask, or do you want to ask me, or would you like me to respond to something?
I do indeed. Now, when Mr. Vert talks about congestion, what is your view of congestion?
Well, I mean, I think blocks are full. I mean, I think that's pretty much undeniable. I think there's people that question, what are the blocks full of? What maybe one man's spam is somebody else's legitimate transaction. It's hard for us to really analyze that in too much depth, except to say that there are a few characteristics of these so-called backups that we have in the network, and amongst those are, a great deal of, say, long chain transactions with tons of unconfirmed inputs, a lot of activity that might be characterized as sort of on-chain, gambling, or or mixing, or other kinds of applications that require a lot of block space to do what they're doing. And they're getting crowded out. I mean, they're in those transactions are in the mempool because people are, maybe let's assume it's a completely legitimate purpose, but they're not getting confirmed because their business model doesn't allow them to pay the fees or that the network currently requires. So, that said, I think that, yeah, do I wish that we had bigger blocks right now? I do. Do I see a way there safely at this stage, outside of what we have right in front of us with SegWit? No, I don't. I mean, I'm frankly very concerned about any type of contentious hard fork. Although I do want to see Bitcoin scale, and I do think that part of scaling would be great if the default block size was bigger. I mean, I'm just not sure how to get there outside of what's in front of us right now.
Eric, are the blocks full?
Well, I mean, I fully agree with what's been said. I mean, I even agree with Roger as far as like that. I would like blocks to be much bigger. There's a couple issues though, a couple serious problems. One of them is that resources are not free. So like we have computational resources that someone has to pay for, and right now it like to be able to manage a decentralized network, all these different nodes have to be able to supply these resources, and right now the incentive model for that is not the most robust necessarily. But even bigger than that is what Phil mentioned, which is the contentious hard fork issue. It turns out to be a much harder problem than I think a lot of people realize to change these kinds of things. It looks really simple in the code that you just change a number, but when you actually look at the different incentive structures of the network and the way the consensus protocols work, what that means is that unless all the nodes are going to update that, and have that updated by the same time. And this means updating everyone, every single merchant, every single user, every single person that has, Bitcoin installed somewhere with some wallet that maybe they don't run all the time. Like everyone has to upgrade. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to transact, or they're going to be forked off the network, or they risk losing money. And there has to be a lot of precautions taken to deal with, the contingencies of what happens if you get, multiple blockchains out of that. Which are the one, which is the one that traders are going to consider the valid one? Which is the one that exchanges are going to trade? Stuff like that. Once you start talking about hard forks, you're basically completely getting away from the whole Satoshi consensus, which is algorithmic. With Satoshi consensus, there's a specific algorithm which determines which chain is considered the valid chain. But as soon as you start talking about hard forks, that goes out the window, and now people need to decide which is the one that is actually valid. And once that happens, you've removed the algorithmic money aspect of Bitcoin, and it becomes political money again. And unless you have a very fairly uncontroversial thing. For instance, if there was some security issue that needed an urgent fix, that's something that's in everyone's interest on the network. I think it'd be pretty easy to get everyone to agree and to have consensus for that. But whenever you're talking about anything that's controversial, and by the way, I've never taken a side on the block size debate, so to speak. I mean, I from the very beginning, I thought that it would be great to be able to increase block size, and actually, one of the reasons that I worked on SegWit was because we actually found a way to do that without requiring a contentious hard fork. We're going to as soon as SegWit activates, we double the on-chain capacity almost basically right away. So that means that we have ways of doing this. It seems a little more complicated if you don't really understand all the intricacies of the system, but it's not that I actually disagree with Roger's idea that we should have more capacity so that we don't have this kind of crowding out of transactions. I think it'd be wonderful if we could stuff an infinite number of transactions in the blockchain, but resources are finite, and there's only so many different paths we have to be able to actually change the rules without breaking the network. And soft forks right now are something that has been done repeatedly and without any serious incident, and Bitcoin has been able to to upgrade the protocol that way, and it requires really a consensus of a much larger segment of the community. There's nobody in particular that can really push that. With hard forks, there's nobody that can push it either. It's not up to developers to decide whether a hard fork gets deployed. It's not up to miners. It's not up to users. Really, everyone needs to agree. So unless everyone's on the same page, it's not going to work. It's going to split the network. So that means that and also if someone could push a hard fork, if it was possible, then that would be actually really dangerous because they become a target. Now you're talking about there's a point of failure, a single point of failure in the system where people could get coerced, like for by state actors or by other malevolent actors that could pressure the network to modify rules to their particular liking. So it's frustrating that the rules are hard to change in Bitcoin, but that's also a feature because that's what guarantees that's what provides the system guarantees. The strong system guarantees that there's going to be no third party that can actually overwrite a contract.
Okay, Alex, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
All right, thank you. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
So my name is Alex Petrov. Right now I'm working for Bitfury. My previous experience is over 34 years in computer programming to performing IT. I know over 30 different programming languages. I was leading a lot of different projects. Some of them are huge commercial projects, right now having millions of users. I was also skillified security and penetration testing coding. I was performing review of source code. I know how to search for potential risk places, vulnerabilities. I have also economical degree, so I think it's like, in short, the basic.
What's your view on the block issue, and are the blocks full right now?
So the blocks is like a small train cars. They have places. If you would like to send some transactions, you are paying the small fee to get the place. It doesn't matter how much of dollars you're sending. It can be 1 cent or one big box filled with 50 Ks. You are just paying to send that amount of money using the like electronical form of transferring that amount. So then your sending transaction is full of unconfirmed the transactions. But right now the blocks, they are taking just from a pool of unconfirmed transactions, the transactions, and trying to send them through. Normally, you can see the trains is almost loaded, but the biggest issue right now, the network is not one single place. It's divided for a small different layer, for a couple of different layers. The old software normally doesn't rely a lot of transactions. The XT version, classic version, and Bitcoin limited version, they are functioning a little bit differently, and they appear like additional layer of the protocol. And then they are talking about the different clients implementation, the practically creating the additional protocol implementation. And these create the network inconsistent. It's not this one single place, it's multiple layers. And right now it's creating the problems. It's not a big one, but it's already existing.
Roger, what is your understanding of Bitcoin Core's development process and how it is not implementing the changes you think are necessary to remove some of these bottlenecks?
I think all of the business community, the Coinbases and the blockchains and the Zappos and the Circles have been saying, hey, we need more capacity, we need more capacity, we need more capacity now. And there was a Satoshi Roundtable event in Florida almost exactly a year ago, maybe 11 months ago now, where the CEOs of just about all these companies were there, and a good chunk of the core development team was there as well, including a number of people on this call. Alex, Phil, and Eric were all there. I was there. And the business community was begging and pleading and saying, hey, we're about to hit a scaling wall. We need more capacity. Here's, we need this now. Please, please, please do this. And the reply basically from the core development team was, no, absolutely not, no compromise. Like, we're going to take our time and we're going to do it this way. And we don't care what the actual people that are using Bitcoin for commerce is. And maybe I'm mischaracterizing the response a bit, but that's certainly the way that all the people in the business community felt the response was. And so it left a lot of frustration, I think, in the business community side of things, especially because I think a lot of people in the business community feel like, we initially, there was BIP 101 that I think went to 8 gigabytes over however many years. So then they stopped asking for 8 gigabytes. And then they started asking for, I think, Bitcoin XT, which was 20 megabytes. And then they started asking for 8 megabytes. There was a 8 megabyte proposal. And then there was a, 248 megabytes over a couple of years. And then finally there was a 2 megabyte request with Bitcoin Classic. And the reply at every step of the way from the core team was 1 megabyte, 1 megabyte, 1 megabyte, no compromise whatsoever. So I think that left a lot of people in the business community just feeling like the core development team does not listen to the actual people and businesses that are using Bitcoin at all, and we're not willing to compromise in any way whatsoever to provide some additional capacity. And I had what I thought at the time and still think was a really, really nice, fairly lengthy conversation with Adam Back there in Florida. And he asked me, like, how much scaling do you need? And I said, like, we don't have to scale infinitely overnight. We just need to scale fast enough to keep up with the consumer demand so that we don't, start causing problems for the users of Bitcoin. And if you look at the, at that time, 7-year track record of Bitcoin, we need to scale somewhere between, I think it was like, 1.5 and 2.5x per year was the history. And if we can keep up with that, then I think we're on the right pace. And just doubling the block size from 1 megabyte to 2 megabyte would have doubled the capacity of Bitcoin and bought us another year or two of time to keep the customers happy and keep the network flowing smoothly. Whereas now, we just saw a couple of days ago, Circle basically left Bitcoin. Coinbase, who used to be a Bitcoin only company, is busy integrating all sorts of altcoins. All sorts of other businesses are busy integrating altcoins, whereas a year or two ago, that would have been unimaginable because everybody knew that Bitcoin was the chosen one. Bitcoin was the winner. Bitcoin was the end-all be-all of cryptocurrencies. And now that the user experience has become so horrible with high fees and long confirmation times and high risk of double spend, people are looking really, really hard at altcoins. That's really, really sad and frustrating for me to see. And I feel like the core team, and not to generalize too terribly much, but I think a lot of them don't think that anything could ever win other than Bitcoin. And I went in the core Slack channel, and obviously the core Slack channel doesn't represent all of core, but I went in there and I was talking with them maybe a month ago, and I told them, doesn't it concern you guys that Coinbase, the company that used to be Bitcoin only, is busy integrating altcoins? And their reply was, F them, they suck, I hope they leave Bitcoin. And I said, doesn't it worry you guys that blockchain.info, the Bitcoin wallet that's responsible for more Bitcoin transactions than every single other wallet combined, is looking into altcoins and figuring out what they're going to have to do because Bitcoin hasn't been able to scale in time? And again, the reply was, F them, I hope they leave, their wallet sucks. And to me, it just seems crazy, like that, these are some of the very biggest businesses in all of Bitcoin that have brought more people to Bitcoin than, just about any other businesses in the world. And the people that are sitting in the core Slack channel are saying that they hope those businesses leave Bitcoin. And then we just saw Circle basically leave Bitcoin, and I'm not sure what the reaction was in the Slack channel to there. But to me, this just seems, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Bitcoin is amazing. We want as many people to use Bitcoin as we can, but a bunch of people that are supposedly Bitcoin supporters are saying that they hope the biggest Bitcoin companies leave Bitcoin. That's crazy talk. So,
all right, we have a businessman here. We have Phil. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think that going to Bitcoin Core Slack and having a few people in there talking shit about BCI or about Coinbase does not, that's just a few people voicing their opinion. And so I wouldn't I wouldn't conflate that to say that that's what Core believes at all. The other thing too, I'd like to kind of recharacterize a little bit about some of those conversations we had in Florida. I think it's unfair to say that Core is saying 1 megabyte forever and no compromise. In fact, I think that SegWit itself represented a compromise of sorts. And moreover, I think that there are a lot of people in Core would like to see bigger base blocks, raising that sort of that fixed variable. But I think that it's a question of order of operations. And I think with the first thing, it's been clear with a lot of the experiments done with 20 megabytes and 8 megabytes or what have you, is that the network needs to be upgraded and optimized to be able to handle the additional flow because it's very lumpy in nature, and it can be difficult for nodes that don't have a lot of bandwidth to be able to keep up. Block propagation can be very slow if you have bigger blocks. And so I think that Core, rightly, in my estimation, is focusing on upgrading the network before we address the question of potentially increasing block sizes. There are people in Core that are all in favor of potentially doing that, except for the fact, as I mentioned earlier, there's a new fear of hard forks given the sort of Ethereum Classic example that we have. But I go a step further about altcoins, and I've heard this a few times already. I guess you could call me a Bitcoin maximalist on some level, but the reality is that I also see a role for other cryptocurrencies, for a way for people to innovate on lower value blockchains where if things go wrong, we haven't, you're not sort of disturbing the inner sanctum of Bitcoin, so to speak. And I think that there could be, altcoins or higher throughput where, you can basically do things on near real time confirmations, things like that. We see lots of these experiments. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And for exchanges to embrace those is, I think, part of natural competition that has to exist in the space. So I think that, yeah, I would like to see Bitcoin be king, but I don't think that it's realistic to assume that it ever could really remain king if it doesn't have good competition to keep it, to keep it on top. I don't know. Those are just some of my thoughts to what you were saying, Raj.
I was
And
going
I
to
think
actually.
I agree with what you were saying, Phil. In fact, I agree with almost everything I've heard from both you and Eric and Alex on this call. I think we agree on like 99% of things, and the main question is maybe just the order of operations here, and maybe that would be a good next topic. And sorry to interrupt, Mr. Hodel.
Well,
Yep.
actually, Shot, I want to jump in here because Roger, you were mentioning about this willingness of core to compromise, and I agree with PGP that you can't just use a couple of people in the core Slack channel or people on r/Bitcoin and say that is core. There's trolls everywhere, right? But let's talk about then the roundtable consensus earlier this year, where a number of core developers signed on in a relatively informal but semi-formal agreement to push SegWit first, and then 3 months after they would do a hard fork to expand the block size. So doesn't this show a willingness to compromise from
Hey,
core?
So,
That
so
was
I
not,
don't want to. So sorry for interrupting, but I really feel like I need to respond to this because
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to go, and I really think that there's a lot of stuff that needs to be kind of I need to cover regarding what Roger said in particular, and I think Phil I think made a lot of great points, but I think I really need to comment on a couple of things that need to be cleared up. First of all, Bitcoin Core is an open source software development project. Anyone can participate. All the meetings are fully public. We have a mailing list that anyone can join at any time. Anyone can submit pull requests. Anyone can fork the code base and add their own features and maintain whatever they want in there. I think everyone pretty much encourages that as part of the open source ethos. And I think that none of us, most of us actually work as volunteers. I've never received any single payment in any way from any of the companies that Roger mentions. So I don't think that the sense of like entitlement that just because they want something, like we're supposed to do it when we're not getting paid anything by these people to do it, is morally correct. And secondly, I think that if anyone really wants to build whatever they want into this, everything is out in the open. All the source code is there, and so you can take it, you can run with it, you can do whatever the hell you want with it, and it's like we're giving this to the world for free, right? But then lastly, I think that the main issue here is that what's being asked for here are not just changes within the open source project itself, but consensus rule changes, and this is a totally separate issue. We have other implementations of Bitcoin like Bitcoin D that have that support the same consensus rules, and that's totally fine. Nobody has a problem with that in core. It's not like we're competing over implementation. The problem is when you start to change consensus rules in ways that are incompatible, then that results in a network that different people on the network are not going to agree on which transactions are valid, and that's a serious problem. Nobody has the power to get everyone on the network to agree on those kinds of rule changes on hard forks. It's not up to developers, it's not up to miners, it's not up to exchanges, it's not up to businesses, it's not up to merchants. It's everyone has to agree, everyone has to move. So it's not, even if we wanted to increase block size with a hard fork, it's not in our power to do that without seriously risking the network fragmenting and giving the level of contentiousness that existed. And once again, I've never taken a position myself on the block size. I think that it's something that I would like to see the block size increase as more, as better technology allows for it. But I think that given the fact that it is contentious, that it is controversial, it means that if we were to try to push for that, the network would split. And we've seen that happen in Ethereum already. And some people have argued that, well, the total market cap didn't go down significantly, even though it's gone down quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. I think that with Bitcoin, the situation will be far, far more severe because, first of all, it's actually used for real commerce. It's not just for speculation. Secondly, all other cryptos trade against it. We're talking about hugely disruptive changes here, hugely disruptive events to the entire ecosystem. And even though I totally sympathize with the idea that we want to have more transactions and more users and have fees low and everything, I I think that this overrides all those concerns. This means that the network can. This could really crash the entire price of the network, reduce confidence in the system. It destroys fungibility because you have different tokens. It creates inflation because you have more tokens created within the same economy. It splits the economy, etc. So there's so many issues here that happen, and even if an open source development project could have the power to change this stuff, if they did that, they immediately make themselves a target. So any malicious actor that wants to coerce the network into something now knows who to go after, and you can't really blame the core devs for not wanting to have a gun pointed at their heads.
May I make also a remark?
Please, Alex.
So then the Roger was talking about the meeting, it's a Russian roundtable in Florida. He said the core was against the increasing the block size. I think this is wrong, because the talks about increasing the block size, they was even 2 years ago, and the discussion was very hot about how to increase them. And in Florida, the talks was more about the classic and core, and it was also about the trust for a core or for classic, what version we should choose, how developers should work, and so on. It wasn't against the block size increase. It was just about the different different ways how to increase the block size. What they have right now, so the practically the consensus roundtable consensus meeting in Hong Kong, it was my initiative to create the place for different parties just to find the consensus. The Bitcoin is all about the consensus. The consensus is always may has place if you're talking, if you keep it the negotiation, if you agree to listen the other side and find the better way. So the core right now is already built the segregated witness. So the segregated witness is exactly the compromise. I think it's a great and solid platform how to increase the block size in the smart way, providing exponential growth of transaction, increasing the transaction amount in the block in single block. It also provides a lot of extension for future expansion, building the solid base. Just increasing the block size by itself, physically increasing the block size by itself, like Bitcoin Limited was trying to do, and like it was also suggested from the classic side, I think it's quite risky. We're talking multiple times before about the performance issue on the network level inside the software, and this performance issue should be resolved before they are trying to build more massive scale transaction network, and it should be done. If it doesn't solve the performance issue inside the Bitcoin client, so it will just lead to crash. And it's very, very simple. Bitcoin, it's like a huge land, it's huge community. If you just made one single mistake, critical mistake, everything will be crashed. If you're trying to, without any consensus, just to run our own version, so it just break all the land. It will be small kingdoms, and there will be no any more consensus, and the even market cap price will be much smaller from the whole single place.
Roger, do you support SegWit now, and why do you not think a hard fork would be contentious?
So I'm a bit of an agnostic on the SegWit issue. I think it's interesting that for the vast majority of the time that SegWit was being promoted, it was being promoted because it ends transaction malleability, and that enables all sorts of layer 2 things. And only much more recently have people started saying that it's non-chain scaling solution. So that seems like a bit of a change in the dialogue there. I guess part of why I'm maybe not as concerned about a software hard fork as some of the other people on this call is because we're undergoing an economic code hard fork right now, and we're seeing that that's enough to make people fork away from the Bitcoin ecosystem. So I think we're headed towards a hard fork regardless. Either there's going to be an economic code hard fork or a software code hard fork. And I think they both pose similar levels of danger, but the upside from having a software code hard fork is really, 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 really good. And the downside, there's some danger there, no doubt. But I think if we hard fork the economic code of Bitcoin, that's for the most part, the end of the future for Bitcoin. So I see a hard fork to the economic code is even more dangerous than a hard fork to the economic code. And I suppose that's why maybe I have a difference of opinion than some of the other people on this call in regards to that.
Can you describe in more detail what you mean by an economic hard fork in detail, if you can?
Sure. So for the last 8 years of Bitcoin, or 7.5 years, the Bitcoin transactions were close to free. They were, as soon as you saw them broadcast on the network, you had a really, really high chance that they were going to get confirmed. The chance of it being double spent was very, very low. And in recent times, those things have been changing, right? The transaction fees have become really, really high. I'm sure Phil and others can tell you, anybody that's running in sort of a business using Bitcoins that have payments from multiple customers going in and out, oftentimes a fee for a transaction with multiple inputs or multiple outputs, you're talking about tens of dollars for a single fee. Even I paid one transaction was $50 in network fees as computed by a Bitcoin Core of all clients, and I think that's a real problem for Bitcoin, to the point where we'll see people start using things other than Bitcoin. So we have this track record of the characteristics that made Bitcoin successful for the last 7.5 years. Don't change them. If you change them, things are going to break, and that's what we're starting to see happen with businesses like Circle basically calling it quits on a big chunk of their Bitcoin business, and other businesses scrambling to integrate things other than Bitcoin. And I really do agree, though, with Phil that it is good that we have all these altcoins, and it's good that we have all these things to experiment with as well. But that doesn't mean that we should experiment on the economic code of Bitcoin by letting it change. Somebody made a really, really good point. I think it was Jeff Garzik, that basically said, in order to keep Bitcoin's economic code the same, we have to change the software code, because for the entire history of Bitcoin, the steps were, the blocks went from 5 kilobytes to 10 kilobytes to 50 kilobytes to 100 kilobytes and 500 kilobytes and then 700 kilobytes and now 1,000 kilobytes. Now it should be allowed to go to 1,100 kilobytes, and that hasn't been allowed to happen. So that's a fundamental change to the way Bitcoins work. And I think it's really, really, really dangerous for the future of Bitcoin.
Alex, does this economic code Roger's talking about exist?
So then Roger was talking about the economical hard fork. So it's not about the economics. So you can have a different economical opinion, or you can have a different economical theory, but it's all about the software. And then they are talking about the soft fork and hard fork. It's the only way how you are trying to offer the new solution for all community. So the soft fork is the small change in the software, and you just creating the border. Then people agree, then they can activate the feature. If you're creating the hard fork, it's really more complicated, because you're updating the software in millions of computers, and you should also define the precise time then the switching from the old version of software for new software. If you doesn't do it without proper testing, if you doesn't do it without proper coordination, and this proper coordination also requires a lot of time. So a lot of time, it's just a couple of months. So I'm thinking it's at least like 5-6 months, because all the businesses should test the new version. They should update their software. They should update the cold wallets. They should update the hardware wallets, and for hardware wallets, they should also write the new firmwares for hardware wallets, and they also provide the way how to the end user customer can update their wallets. And then at one single moment, one single time, agreed time, everyone should switch for new software. It's really complicated. Then you have the economy like 24/7 running all the time. Just agree about that time and do it simultaneously on different levels. If it doesn't do it simultaneously, if it doesn't do all tests properly, this can create a lot of problems. Double spending, what you also mentioned, Roger, what you mentioned also multiple times. So the Bitcoin is really about the solving double spending. It's compensating the real economy mistake, but just writing the balances on the balance sheet. It's also preventing double spending. And the hard fork, then you're switching from old version of software for new one. So it's exactly creating very dangerous moment, very dangerous area, time moment. Then people can use the moment to double spend coins or to manipulate which coins, or you can just stop whole economy for.
All right, Eric, is a hard fork even possible?
I think if everyone were to agree, and that would require some kind of issue that I think, everyone kind of has an interest in fixing it, that's pretty uncontroversial. Like, for instance, a security issue. Like, if a big security issue is discovered that needs to be fixed, I think it's in everyone's interest on the network to fix it. And then possibly it could be coordinated. I think the logistics are still really difficult just by the nature of having to, deploy this thing and get everyone to install it. I think right now the network is sufficiently small that it might be possible to get a big chunk of it if everyone was willing to do it. I think that as the network grows, it's going to get even harder to coordinate this kind of stuff. But if it's contentious or controversial in any way whatsoever, that's probably not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that some people are going to refuse to do that, and if you get different nodes that disagree on this stuff, then basically it breaks the network. So I also wanted to point out another thing, which is that as far as like what Roger said about no compromise, this is actually categorically false. We have a mailing list, and we've had a discussion going for a very long time. And most of last year was actually in that mailing list, we discussed the issues of how to increase block size and how to do a hard fork safely in many conversations, if it was even possible. And we tried to find many ways that we could compromise. Even like Peter Wille wrote a BIP that proposed increasing the block size 17.7% every year, or another stuff like that. There were a lot of people that were very open to the idea of looking for a way that we could do it. There was also like this 248 kind of idea that was kind of thrown around, but that was never really but none of these ideas could achieve sufficient consensus to give us the confidence that yes, if we were to do this, for sure there wouldn't be any of these other issues. And then when SegWit was SegWit was kind of like the culmination of all these discussions, where it was realized that we could actually double on-chain capacity without a hard fork, and also allow for a lot of off-chain applications. And I want to just point out to Roger that these things are not mutually exclusive. They don't compete with each other. We want on-chain capacity, and off-chain stuff like the Lightning Network is actually a completely separate thing, which is for separate use cases. It solves a lot of the problems that I think Roger actually wants solved. For instance, it solves a zero confirmation problem. You can actually send microtransactions with zero confirmations securely for very, very low fees. And I don't see how anyone would possibly think that that's that's basically a use case that we do not have right now. You cannot send very tiny amounts and make it economically viable. It's not very useful for point of sale stuff and for content and service distribution type applications, for instance, that I think would benefit greatly from having these other use cases that do not compete with the on-chain capacity. And SegWit essentially doubles on-chain capacity as soon as it activates. And this was something that we could get all developers behind. We could get a huge chunk of the industry behind, including some of the companies that Roger mentioned. If you go to the Bitcoin bitcoincore.org site, you can actually see the SegWit support, and a huge chunk of the industry is actually very much behind this and wants to see this activate. And after a lot of work and effort, this was the best solution we could come up with that avoids it sidesteps all the hard fork issues. It immediately doubles capacity, and it also allows for all these additional use cases to be added to the network that could not be done before.
Phil?
Okay. So there's okay. This is a great discussion, and I just want to thank WhalePool for putting this together. And yeah, I just want to say one thing. I've heard this mentioned a couple times, Roger, about Circle. Circle has not left Bitcoin. Okay, Circle has gotten out of the on-ramp business of fiat to Bitcoin, not because of Bitcoin or this. I mean, it's really just about that is just a huge headache. I deal with the Circle guys almost every day. They're not out of Bitcoin. I can promise you that. It is just doing the retail on-ramp, off-ramp for fiat is a problem. There's still a Bitcoin wallet. So I just want to make sure that we're clear about that. But one of the problems I see with the issue about the hard fork is hard forks in the past, as Eric has pointed out, there have been emergency hard forks or other things where, okay, there was a security issue or a chain split or a bug or whatever. And, but the community was much smaller the last time this happened. What was it? March of 2013 or something like that. Long time ago. And it was much smaller. Market cap was a lot smaller. And there was less at risk, and it was a more defined community. You knew who to reach out to get things done. Now the question is, if we do a hard fork, the question is, how do we do a hard fork? So I think that part of the process is also trying to figure out what's the safest way to do that. Now, for example, you've got Luke Deshier's idea for doing the evil hard fork, or whatever the term he's using for that. But that's a really interesting, really interesting process that I think is important to this discussion, because the idea of having a hard fork where there is potentially a sizable minority that still wants to be on the old chain, well, the majority chain could merge mine the minority chain into oblivion. Basically, and why would you want to do this? Well, to prevent precisely the problems that Eric was pointing out, of like, oh, somebody being defrauded on the old chain, not being upgraded, not knowing what's going on, getting double spent. So so I think there are evolving ideas about how to handle hard forks, so that if we're going to do a hard fork, I feel like we need to figure out that first. So irrespective of what we hard fork to, and look, there's a whole kitchen sink full of stuff that Core would like to potentially address in a hard fork if we're going to do one. Not just a question of how do we manage the block size cap in that. There's a lot of other things that there's a wish list of things that Core has, or various people in Core have, to address in a hard fork. So I think that if we do a hard fork, and if that's something that the community can get behind, we need to do it in the most efficient way possible. We need to think about we need to develop the mechanics in such a way that we make it as safe as possible. And we got to put everything in there so that we don't have to do hard forks again, because, this is clearly is contentious and takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And I want to make one other comment, and this is kind of a criticism of the SegWit marketing, and it does get under my skin, Eric. I have to say this, but to say that the moment it activates, the capacity of the network is doubled is just simply not accurate. The potential capacity of the network goes up actually fourfold, but people actually have to migrate to new address spaces and wallets to be able to generate transactions that take advantage of SegWit. And that migration will take some time after SegWit is complete. We will start to see that happening, but it'll be, right now it's estimated that if all transactions were SegWit transactions, using the new address space, yes, it would double, that we would get roughly twice the capacity right now, based upon how much people are using multi-sig and whatever and what have you. But it's not going to happen overnight, and I don't like that characterization. I just feel like I need to put that out there.
Roger. Alex, you're back.
Yeah. So the great thing what Philip was mentioning about the SegWit, so yes, it's increasing the capacity quite a lot if people are using this multi-sign. So, and it's also optimizing the input and output in if we have transaction with multiple input and output. It's exactly about optimizing the signatures. And normally, more we are using the Bitcoins, the more we are splitting them. And if you just take a look on the statistics like 2 years ago and 1 year ago, the number of inputs of splitted coins, it's growing, and it will grow in the future more, even more, because instead of using the single fraction of a Bitcoin, they are splitting for smaller parts of the coins. It's meaning they're using the more inputs. The SegWit is exactly the smart way how to optimize it, starting from now and for the future. And SegWit also combine the additional extensions. So the Lightning is very discussable. I know it will be painful discussion if they are starting it right now. Yes, it's also the Lightning also about the off-chain transaction. But I think they just providing the solid base for future extension like Lightning, like Must. It's just providing additional flexibility how you can scale the Bitcoin, how you can use it for multiple purposes, hugely increasing and exponentially increasing the auditory for future. The Lightning like a solution can provide the huge amount of transaction and easily outcompeted the Visa and Master and PayPal. And it's also very fast transactions. You can use to pay for coffee, and it's very, very optimal.
Roger, as a roadmap, do you think we should activate SegWit now?
As I said earlier, I'm a bit agnostic on the whole thing. I guess one of my biggest complaints or things that I'm upset about is the censorship that goes on our Bitcoin, and I'm glad that the TeamSpeak and Whale Chat or WhalePool here is giving an opportunity for both sides to be heard. But I think the censorship going on there, and I understand it's not the end-all be-all, but a lot of people in the general Bitcoin, dabblers or people that are just kind of, mildly interested in Bitcoin, they go and get their news from there. The fact that you're only one side of the opinion is allowed to be heard on this website, that probably more people in the general public get their Bitcoin news from than every single other Bitcoin website combined, has done a really, really big disservice to both sides of the scaling debate. I think a lot of the SegWit supporters thought that it was instantly going to have, or almost overnight going to have, its 95% support. And that turned out not to be the case. And I think that's part of a problem. That's a problem for both sides of the issue. And one of the things that I would like to see from the core side and the core supporters, and like I understand that you guys aren't famous and you're not his boss or his mom or whatever, but I think people should speak out a lot more strongly against the suppression of dissenting opinions that's going on there, and speak out in favor of allowing people to have free and open discussion about these things. And one of the things that concerns me the most is I want Bitcoin to be a free and open transaction, platform in which anybody can transact with anybody else anywhere in the world without permission. And if a bunch of the people that are working on Bitcoin aren't even willing to step up to the plate and say, hey, on our Bitcoin, people should be allowed to have more than one opinion, it makes me very hesitant to trust them to maintain Bitcoin as a free and open transaction, platform where people can transact with each other without having to get permission from somebody else. So if we want to start, I guess, healing a bit of the divide and mending the animosity that's developed on both sides of the scaling debate, I think the very, very, very first step for that is for people to speak out strongly against the suppression of dissenting opinions on our Bitcoin. And until that happens, I think we're going to continue to see a lot of the animosity and vitriol online, which is really too bad, because I remember in the early days of Bitcoin too, it was just one giant love fest. And everybody knew we're about to change the entire world for the better. And I think we still are going to change the entire world for the better, but there's not quite as much of that love fest online again. And I would like to see that happen again. So I think a good step for that is for more people to speak out against the moderation policies going on over on our Bitcoin.
Okay. Now hold on a second.
And
now,
sorry, we kind of got sidetracked from SegWit. Again, I'm kind of agnostic on the whole SegWit thing. I don't even have enough hash power to block SegWit if I wanted to. And I certainly won't be the lone holdout if SegWit gets to, 94% of the worldwide, hash rate supporting it, and I have 6% on my pool. I would switch. I wouldn't block it at all.
But you're an influential voice, Roger. I mean, you know, the thing is it is here right now, and it has undeniable benefits. You know, we can list them, but being the block size thing alone. But I think that SegWit would dramatically benefit from the chance of activation, which I think is a good idea. It's very well tested. It's there. It may not be the solution that you want or that everybody else wants, and it may be just one step toward more solutions down the road. But your endorsement would go a long way toward convincing miners, I think, to start signaling for it. Are you willing to endorse SegWit? And if not, why not?
I'm certainly willing to consider endorsing SegWit. I suppose the reason I'm not going to endorse SegWit today is mainly because I feel like the current core team didn't listen at all to the actual business community that was using Bitcoin.
But that doesn't have anything but the code that's there and ready right now. And I understand your points. Your points about Thamos, I'm with you on that. I think there is, you know, the censorship in our Bitcoin is a little heavy-handed at times, but Thamos is not a core developer, okay? And the core devs, you can't say that core didn't listen, because was an active discussion on the mailing list ongoing. You know, there's no censorship there, okay? But it's here now, so it doesn't matter. I don't think it should matter how we got here. We have to think about the future, like you say. And it's a product that's here. It's now. It's very well tested, and it just seems to me it'd be a real shame for not to activate or to delay activation. Why?
Yeah.
I suppose at this point, because I feel that the current core team hasn't listened enough, and obviously that's debatable. But from my perspective, I really feel like that they didn't listen to the Coinbases and the blockchains of the world and the businesses that are actually bringing Bitcoin to make it usable for the masses. It takes both sides of the equation here. It takes the business side and it takes the technical side to make the underlying protocol robust to do that enough. But I feel like they've pushed out a lot of the people. You know, Gavin Andreessen has been treated horribly by the current core dev team, and I think that's a really, really shame. You know, this is the guy that Satoshi himself handed over the control of the project to, and he's now basically been all but pushed out of the project completely. And so at this point, I wouldn't feel at all bad if additional competing protocol development teams start rivaling Core's position for the top spot in protocol development.
But Roger, that's like saying that the Nash equilibrium is bullshit because Nash was a schizophrenic and he should, despite the fact he got a Nobel Prize. You have to just look at the work, the code that we have in front of us now. We're at this impasse right now where it's almost like I feel, and I may be mischaracterizing, and I hope I'm not, but it feels like you're leading a filibuster, really just because you're trying to force something that is otherwise, has, I think, groundswell support and should get activated. It's here. It's really well tested. It's here today, and then we can debate what the next step is. But I think that to block it, or not to endorse it for political reasons, just strikes me as is standing in the way of progress for Bitcoin.
So I tend to agree with everything that you just said right there, Phil. But I also think that everything you just said applies equally to Bitcoin XT and then Bitcoin Classic and now Bitcoin Unlimited by the other side. I think that there's a lot of political maneuvering.
But those are hard forks. Roger, those are hard forks, and we can have those debates and we can discuss that. But I think that as we've discussed already here tonight, I mean, hard forks, a contentious hard fork that doesn't have overwhelming support is just a really scary proposition. Unless, like I said earlier, unless we really do the science and the engineering and the research behind how do we do hard forks safely. And there's some ideas about that. And if we're going to do a hard fork, let's think about more than just simply block size. So we can have those discussions, but SegWit is here today. It's a soft fork. It's a very careful piece of engineering. It solves lots of problems besides just scaling. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I mean, if one way to really sort of destroy Bitcoin, I think, for this to not activate because of politics and completely discourage all the people that volunteer their time to work on Bitcoin, which is dozens of people who are not just Blockstream, and I just feel like it would be a real shame for that to happen at this stage.
So I'm open to those arguments, Phil, and I'll give that some more thought over the coming days. I guess one point I would like to disagree with on slightly is I don't think it's fair to say that SegWit has overwhelming support. It has about 25% of the hash rate, and Bitcoin Unlimited has about 15% of the hash rate.
Of miners, they're relatively centralized. Okay, they're mostly in China, and there's been a big political effort to kind of delay or block. And there's also it's technically also a pain in the ass for miners to upgrade to this one too. So I think that part of what we're seeing here is a delay in miners being able to signal. But and maybe Alex can speak to that, frankly. But okay, I think that overwhelming support. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that there are a lot of users that would just assume see it rather than not see it. I don't think that I think there's a minority of people that say, I don't want SegWit, block it. I mean, that just seems completely counterproductive. It is what we have. It may not be the best thing, but it's what we have now. I'm always reminded of the Winston Churchill, quote, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others, and maybe SegWit is that. Maybe it's just the lesser of evils. We just have to, it's the compromise solution, but more importantly, it's the tested solution that we have before us right now, and it's a soft fork. So, but look, I respect that you have your opinions on this, and I don't mean to ride you too hard about it. I apologize.
No, you're making a strong case, and I'll give it some more consideration. I guess I'd also like to hear your thoughts. One concern and one argument I've heard against SegWit is that yes, it's a soft fork, but it's a soft fork that can't be undone. And if SegWit were to activate and then later the hash rate were to switch, then suddenly all these SegWit transactions become spendable by anybody. Do you have any thoughts or opinion on that?
It's not that they become spent. Well, you know what? Eric should answer this, but I mean, I don't think that's quite that's not an accurate.
It's really no different than other soft forks, Roger. As soon as it activates, basically once the threshold is reached, the miner incentives are there to enforce those rules, because if they don't, their blocks are going to get orphaned. So that means that it's a very, very strong stable equilibrium for miners to be to want to do that. And reversing a soft fork actually is equivalent to a hard fork. So that the incentives for that are not there. So and that's why there's a 95% activation, to make sure that we cross a sufficiently high threshold, so that it pretty much whatever's left over, there's very little incentive for anyone to try to mine blocks that are not going to be accepted by the other miners. So once it activates, and this is the way we've done all the soft forks so far. And actually BIP16, which was actually done by Gavin, which was actually Gavin's idea, uses the exact same mechanism of anyone can spend to support pay to script hash, which is what was used for multi-sig transactions. So this has been done before, and it's been very well studied, and we have ways to do it that are safe. So I don't buy any of those arguments.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. So any soft fork, like a SegWit or any hard fork, which is changing the base rules of a Bitcoin, increasing the block size, they are absolutely similar, and they are not reversible without applying the additional hard fork. Or if you would like to change your rules backwards, so you need another one hard fork just to compensate them. But to go forward, they should also improve the Bitcoin protocol, and it's required some changes, and some of them definitely will a little bit change the previous rules. It's just necessary to move forward. But once again, so the one word what you said, so it's just touched me. So the big difference what the XT Classic was offering, it was just huge block size, and they was dangerous. And this is exactly why a lot of people was saying this is a dangerous way, and it's create very high risky felt just to crush all the Bitcoin, all the community. It can lead just to even worst functionality of the Bitcoin. Then you are not able to send the transaction, or then the full nodes amount of full nodes will be just decreased because they will lose motivation and they will not able to function normally. And all the talks during last 1.5 years, it was only about how to increase it safely, how to increase the performance and build a solid base for Bitcoin expansion. All these holy wars, all these very aggressive wars trying to push only one single solution, just loss of time. Right now we have segregated witnesses tested. All we need just to activate it. So lately we can discuss and try to improve or even roll it back by hard fork and just provide another one solution. But if it doesn't get any capacity increase in half year and 1 year, this can be very dangerous, and they will start to lose all community and all the businesses.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of businesses that are actually, I mean, there are a lot of people working on scaling on layer 2 solutions that they're waiting for this, right? I mean, if SegWit doesn't happen, think about all the downstream projects. I think there's 8 or 9 different Lightning Network projects out there that are being sponsored by big organizations and small that will be completely hamstrung without this. I mean, yeah, sure, we've got centralized payment channels today, but they're not. We don't have that. We don't have trustless Lightning networks, and that's what the malleability fix gives us. Yeah, I mean, fixing malleability has been a holy grail for a long time, and the fact that we can do it through a soft fork is, I mean, we should be activating SegWit just for that alone, just for malleability fix.
Phillips, it's great remark. So I'm thinking the Lightning, so I was pretty skeptical about the different solutions similar to Lightning, and I dislike how they're trying to implement these fast payment channels, the zero confirmation, because the zero confirmation is practically creating the ground for double spending, and it's ruining the basic idea of a Bitcoin. Creating the Bitcoin is solving like double spending problem. So the Lightning is very brilliant idea, and I like it because it provides instant payment using the same Bitcoin in very safe manner. So if you get deeper in the technical solution, you will realize it's opening the new world for micro payment, for big payment, and it's providing the instant payment, and you can send the money just in milliseconds in huge volumes using the different channels. And there is almost no way how you can manipulate or steal money or lose money. When you're sending transaction, you're looking it just for a second. If you doesn't release the transaction, so you will just get the money back. So it's the solution which is working on top of a blockchain, and you still need the blockchain to provide the temporary fixes of all the balances. But it's exchanging the money. It's absolutely the same idea like the Bitcoin is working. You're just exchanging the balances of different peoples. If you're trying to manipulate, so there is not another one party, and you will be just pushed out from the market, and you will not be able to provide any services. I think.
Alex.
Yeah.
Alex, do you think it would be good for Bitcoin if Roger endorsed SegWit?
I think in this case, the Bitcoin can take the number 2 or number 3 position because they are losing the time. Right now, the Bitcoin is number 1 because it's take a lot of the people. It's created the biggest community, and it still continue to developing at very fast speed. If we are losing this speed, if we are losing the time in these holy wars, in very aggressive discussion, we are practically losing our resources, and the most major resource, time, to improve a Bitcoin, and then the other competitors just beat the Bitcoin and push it out from market. It will be secondary and maybe even disappear after time. I like Bitcoin like a great solution, and like the community of Bitcoin, because the businesses create the solid ground and they fulfill the Bitcoin by cost. And Bitcoin still has great, brilliant community pushed by different brilliant and bright ideas how to make the Bitcoin more efficient and more safer and more better place.
Eric, do you think it'd be good for Bitcoin if Roger endorsed SegWit?
I would love for Roger to endorse SegWit. I mean, you know, it's something that I've worked on myself, so like I'm very personally connected to it. But I think that, you know, besides just that, I mean, I think it's something that it's almost like a no-brainer to me. Other than like for other like for you know, political reasons that I understand some people might be like resisting it, but really it's kind of like the best of all worlds. It gives everyone something that they want, and it's something that we can do right now that we've gone through exactly how this works and tested it and understand the theory behind it very well. We've been able to reduce the risks to basically, you know, very, very low. And so I really would like to see Roger endorse it. If it doesn't activate on Bitcoin, most likely it will end up getting activated on some blockchain because someone's going to want to use this. I would like to see it activate on Bitcoin first, but if that doesn't happen, then probably it's going to activate on some other blockchain.
And same question to you, Phil.
I mean, yeah, look, I think that, you know, frankly, in deference to Roger, he's been you know, one of the most influential people in Bitcoin, and his support of a myriad of projects was crucial in the early development of Bitcoin. And I think that, you know, there's an opportunity to show leadership and help close ranks around the idea that, look, we may continue to disagree, you know, and we can fight the fight on the you know, in the spring or whatever, but endorsing SegWit now would definitely, you know, help us move Bitcoin forward. I mean, it doesn't take us backwards, that's for sure. And I think that it would definitely benefit from Roger's endorsement for sure.
Okay, Mr. Ver, a bit existential. Do you think if you endorse SegWit, it will be good for Bitcoin?
If I thought it would be good for Bitcoin, I would endorse it, and I'm agnostic at the moment, and that's why I haven't endorsed it. And another interesting round of questions for everybody would be, do you think if, you know, Phil and Alex and, you know, Eric and everybody else here endorsed Bitcoin Unlimited and flexible transactions, which is Bitcoin Unlimited's version of getting rid of transaction malleability, would that be good for Bitcoin? And we don't have to go around and have everybody answer that, but or we can.
But wait. One's a soft fork and one's a hard fork, and I think that we've discussed the externalities of hard forks and the problems associated with that. I think we're really just talking about, you know, this is a soft fork. I mean, do you want to fix to malleability? I mean, and I think that why not, right? Oh, and you're getting capacity increase while you're at it. I just, you know, I think that, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that Bitcoin would greatly benefit from your endorsement, you know, but that's yours to give, Roger.
Okay,
Roger,
one second, Alan, 1 second. Mr. Ver, we often hear that there's some political reason why some figures in the Bitcoin community do not endorse SegWit. Have you heard this?
There's lots of conspiracy theories. I've heard that I'm a CIA plant or an SA plant in Bitcoin too, and that's certainly not true.
Come on, fess up. Joking.
But who are the figures that benefit from SegWit not being activated? Open question.
I think there's genuine concern from a number of parties if segregated witness is the best path forward to allow Bitcoin to scale. And I think that's what's holding myself and a number of others back, and that we think maybe Bitcoin Unlimited and, you know, flexible transactions is a better way to allow Bitcoin to scale. And I think, you know, that ties back into the censorship. The more free and open debate people can have about these subjects, the more people that are going to be convinced in one side or the other. And when people that are maybe on the fence, they look around, and if they become aware of some of the censorship that is going on or the suppression of dissenting opinions, maybe that makes them more likely to support the side that's being censored or suppressed, because they figure, well, if the other side's arguments are so strong, they wouldn't need to resort to suppressing other people's opinions. And I think, and I hope, and I wish that could be one thing that everybody can agree on, is allow free and open discussion and debate about these topics.
Roger, do you understand that the people that actually worked on segregated witness had absolutely nothing to do with any of those subreddit issues, like at all, like zero? They never participated in any of those discussions. They never had anything to do with the moderation policies. It's a totally separate issue, and like they're getting conflated. And I understand that you're upset because your post got deleted, but let's look at the facts here. You own a media company. You own the Bitcoin.com domain. You've been able to speak out on media and get your voice heard everywhere. You've been on documentaries. You've been on TV. What are you talking about being censored? Like you are like one of the most like heard voices in the entire space. So I don't think that you're being honest in saying that you're being censored and then that your opinion is not being heard. I mean, your opinion is very well known in this space. So I don't see how that connects to whether SegWit activates. I don't see what that has anything to do with SegWit activating.
So I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where if I say something, for the most part, I can get my own message out. You're absolutely right about that, Eric. But there's thousands or tens of thousands of other people out there that maybe would be interested in posting and discussing these issues on those forums. And because they don't have the same background in Bitcoin that I do, their posts get deleted, their voices get drowned out, and they don't have any say in the discussion whatsoever. And I think that's a problem for lots and lots of people out there, not just myself.
But
Roger,
to stand against the activation of SegWit for for that, I mean, it I think I agree with Eric. You're conflating two separate issues, and I agree that they're issues. I understand your points about
if I
it.
can jump in and clarify, I'm number one, I'm not blocking SegWit. Number two, even if I were blocking SegWit, it wouldn't be for that reason.
Okay, Roger, there is a lot of time was mentioned like censorship and talking. So looking on all these conversation from a side, so I doesn't like to participate them. But right now, it's more talks about how you're tractating them. So there is definitely the technical community, definitely all the conversation, right? Like we are talking right
I'm
now.
sorry, Alex. There's more talks
they need
about
moderation.
how I'm doing what to them? I couldn't understand the one word there.
They are talking about the moderation. So Reddit has the moderators. They are trying to delete the non-constructional talks, and the Reddit has the separate person who made all this moderation. It's not the censorship. The technical guys, they have a separate discussion, and sometimes there is people start talking about the not technical things. It's more political conversation. Definitely they are deleted. So then people start to create the like political arenas. So instead of the technical improvements, this is the worst. So this is just a loss of time. The development should be concentrated only about the development. The technical people should talk about how to improve it and how to solve the technical problems. The businessmen should talk about the business. The political persons who should better stay away from the technical things and from the business things. It's just increasing the efficiency. And right now, I think once again, they are talking about the efficiency. If they are not using the time, so the Bitcoin can become number 2, number 3, and lose position totally. And this will also mean the has the very strict time right now to improve it, or just to lose time. If you're trying to push any hard fork, it's else required time, because people should test it. And the couple of vulnerabilities what was found in the X-Team Classic, they show the software is not ready. And right now also vulnerability in the Bitcoin Limited. It's very risky. And a lot of problems, what I see, they are trying to implement even this simple block size increase, and they create a lot of mistakes how they are trying to do it. It's just risky. We can talk about this, and you still continue also to protect the You was trying to protect the XT, Bitcoin XT. You was also supporting the classic. One moment, I also like the classic ideas, like one of the possible way of implementation. But lately, I realized there is no future plan, and it's very risky. Right now, Bitcoin Limited is also risky. And just to implement the Bitcoin Limited, they need 5-6 months. It doesn't have that time. They should go with solution what they have right now just to expand and survive, or we will be dead. It's very easy choice. We can continue all this discussion lately, but right now we should just make the decision. Otherwise, we will lose.
Phil?
You know, I don't know. I mean, I think that look, I think that the some of the heavy-handed moderation is definitely an issue. I happen to believe that we should be able to discuss alternate forks on our Bitcoin. I think that the thought there is that there's a slippery slope. You once you allow a certain set of discussion topics, it becomes very difficult to manage from that point forward. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but these are, our Bitcoin may be a default place for people to go, but it is still a privately managed forum. And, we kind of have to ultimately respect that, just as Bitcoin.com is a privately managed website.
And it's totally unaffiliated with the Bitcoin Core software project.
That's right. So, and I think that there's a lot of conflation between sort of Thamos and Bitcoin Core, and I think that that's been decried many times. I understand, Roger, that it's still a problem in your eyes, and I get that, but I think conflating those two is just not the right thing to do. And then to use SegWit as a political football, when a lot of work has gone into this by a lot of dedicated people who only have the best interests of Bitcoin at heart, just like you do, Raj. I mean, I know you do. I mean, you live and breathe Bitcoin, and I know that everything that you want, what's best for Bitcoin. But what we have right now, we have something now, and I'm really worried that politics is going to get the better of this, and it's going to highlight yet another problem with Bitcoin is mining centralization. And that's another reason why we have to be careful about block size increases, because the centralization pressures are really big. So, I think that at the end of the day, I think Core is certainly interested in trying to find other ways of more capacity. I think that SegWit gives us a sort of a temporary breathing room. And I think that we'll definitely look for other solutions. I don't think that layer 2 solutions, by the way, are the only way out. I mean, I think that Bitcoin will have to come to terms with this and eventually figure out a sort of on-chain scaling solution. But I think that we have to find the right one, and it has to be well tested, and it has to be deployed far. There has to be a lot of notice for the flag date, and that's just, we don't have time for that right now. SegWit is what we have. That's how I feel.
Roger?
So one really interesting point that was brought to my attention yesterday that I hadn't been aware of before is that by limiting the amount of block space that the miners are allowed to produce, that contributes towards mining centralization, and it prevents additional players from coming into the mining space that might otherwise come into the mining space. And of course, the more players in the mining space, the more decentralized it is. And I thought that was a really, really interesting point, and it was made in an article by John Block. It's on the front page of fee.org at the moment. And I thought that was a really interesting point that hadn't occurred to me until yesterday when I read this article. So I'd like to encourage people to give that a read. I think it's called Bitcoin Economics in One Lesson, but it was a really interesting point that...
Okay, Eric, is that true
knowing.
technically? Eric, is
I
that true?
don't believe that to be the case, but even if it were, I just want to point out to Roger that I'm not opposed to him as far as like wanting bigger blocks. I think that, you know, I would love to see blocks that are bigger and that can support more transactions. But we have real technical constraints here. You know, this is not a political question of like, you know, whether like we want to do it or not. It's that we have real technical issues that are, you know, that are very, very, you know, very tricky hurdles to overcome if we want to actually be able to do this without severely breaking the network or taking serious risks. And none of us are in a position to push this unilaterally. So I think that all this, you know, blame that Roger places on core developers is totally misplaced, because none of them have the power to make this happen. I mean, all that core developers could do is, or any other software project or company or anyone that wants to contribute anything in this space, is to suggest something, you know, and to propose an idea and see if it gains traction. So far, none of these other ideas have gained traction. SegWit has gained traction. We've been able to get you know, a huge chunk of the industry, most of the developer community. So it's like, you know, and this is something that it also it avoids, it sidesteps all the other, you know, all the hard fork issues. So it's like there, you know, there really is no a better way that I can think of right now that that can really solve all these problems. And it's not about trying to block any kind of, you know, block size increase or anything. Quite the contrary. It's a way of finding a way to increase block sizes without suffering any of these other problems that have been very well studied. You know, and issues that we still need to find, you know, that we still don't have any other solutions for, that we know present very, very serious risks. And that, you know, even if we wanted to do that, there is no way we could really push this.
Yeah, Roger, I mean, read the IRC logs. I mean, it's herding cats everywhere.
That's one of Bitcoin's biggest strengths and biggest weaknesses at the same time. There's nobody to blame or go to control the whole thing, and that's what makes all of this censorship resistant, but also hard to get things done.
You know, there's one other thing that I've been seeing in the chats here several times, and I know that people want to hear about, and that is the phenomena of empty blocks, and how SegWit might improve that, or how bigger blocks, you know, that aren't properly planned without network optimizations could actually increase. And I don't know, maybe Eric and Alex, I would really like to hear your sort of your take on what's going on there, and especially like you look at like Antpool. I mean, these guys are. I mean, the amount of empty blocks these guys mine is shocking.
Alex?
Yeah. So the empty blocks is the point how the miners also can show their position about supporting the Bitcoin, because yes, technically you can mine the empty block, but it's meaning you are delaying processing of the transactions. And the Bitfury made decision especially to do not mine the empty blocks. Yes, potentially we can lose a little bit of money, but technically the trying to process all transactions and process more transactions. I was posting also the graphs, and it's also naturally show you can increase avoiding the mining the empty blocks. You can increase the transaction amounts for 10-12% per month. Processing more transaction, it's 450,000 transaction more if you are not mining the empty blocks. But technically, it's your the economically and technically, it's your freedom and choice. You can mine them or you cannot mine them.
Isn't the issue though with SegWit? Doesn't SegWit offer an improvement in validation speeds to be able to avoid some of the reasons why people mine empty blocks?
The SegWit just provide the more compressed blocks. It's like taking more transactions, physically smaller blocks. It's also about.
Well, let me just can I sorry for interjecting, Alex.
Yep.
Well, SegWit does actually provide bigger blocks, right? But there's also compact blocks, which has also been deployed with segregated witness, which solves a lot of the latency issues between peers and it speeds up sync times. So that, you know, so this is something that's separate. Besides the soft fork itself, we're also providing a way for you know, an improvement in the relay capacity of nodes. But as far as like the fix to the validation problem, yes, the current you know, currently there's an n squared number of operations with a number of signatures. If you have a really, really big transaction that has a lot of inputs, it can take a very, very long time to validate it. And SegWit fixes this issue. But that's not so much the issue with empty blocks. I think that there's other strategies that miners are using, especially validationless mining, to get around some of the latency issues, or there could be some misconfiguration stuff. But I guess Alex would probably know better than me as far as what miners might actually be doing with that.
Yeah, but I exactly like the compressed blocks. Yes, it's the way how you can transfer blocks more efficiently, and it's also increasing the network efficiency because we have limited amount of miners and all the orphans, all the collisions, they practically decreasing the network possibilities to process more transactions. But what I really like about this segregated witness, it's a smart way how to pack more transactions in the smaller blocks. It's meaning in the network, there you should transfer the physically big blocks, you are getting just more transactions in times. So if you're performing right now like segregated witness, so they are getting almost twice bigger blocks. And if you're performing the hard fork half year later, they can take 8 times more transaction per one single block. So comparing to Bitcoin Unlimited, so if you changing the block size, physical block size from 1 megabyte to 2 megabytes, just taking twice bigger amount of transactions. If you're performing the same using the segregated witness, you're taking 8 times more transactions. So it's just comparing the linear growth to exponential growth. And I think it's more efficient in this way. It's also solving a lot of the small problems. The compact blocks, it's just a part of the segregated witness. The compact notation of the transactions, it's also about this saving the space. And it's also, by the way, allowed to save the fee on the bigger transactions.
Yeah, and not to mention after SegWit, we can also soft fork in Schnorr signatures, which will definitely also further increase the efficiency of block space usage.
Yeah, definitely. So this is a part of a huge roadmap, and this is also what I like about the segregated witness and the core work. So the core is not working about just this one single short solution. They are thinking about the long-term solutions. They are building one solution which presenting the solid ground for more expansions, and more expansions. And you can be sure they are trying to improve the protocol in the long term. If we are talking about the just one single block size, physical block size increase, it's only short-term solution. You doesn't think about the consequences. You doesn't provide a lot of additional expansions. You doesn't have a long-term roadmap how you will increase and how you will solve potential issues after this small step, just increasing the physical block size. Yes, the physically just increase the block size is very simple. You just in the source code, you are changing a couple of places, just changing the sizes of the blocks, but it's create a lot of additional risk and potential issues. It's not thinking about the long term.
So Alex, if I can add a little bit there, I think you're either ignoring or maybe unaware of a bunch of the additional long-term planning that's being done by the Bitcoin Unlimited team to end transaction malleability and enable all sorts of wonderful layer 2 technologies. Like there's lots of long-term planning and thinking and discussion that's going on about that in teams other than just the core team alone. So I think it's important for people to realize that.
Roger, I was following the Bitcoin Unlimited, so I even test the Bitcoin Unlimited, and I also review a source code of Bitcoin Unlimited, like I was also testing the Classic and XT before. But sorry to say, the XT version, Bitcoin XT, has a lot of issues, and technically they are risky. The way how they are trying to implement some of features like XT blocks are just risk. Was more conservative, and it represents less risk. Bitcoin Unlimited, the flexible block size, the very variable block size, then you can change block size on the fly. It's, I think, not the best solution. The just fixed block size increase is much simpler to implement and much simpler to control. If you're trying to play increasing and decreasing and providing the ability for miners to choose the block size, it's more complicated and more risky, even security more risky. And this is why I'm skeptical about that. So I'm ready to talk about this, but in most of the cases, people just like their ideas and they're just trying to push their ideas whatever they want. So the Bitcoin is open society, it's open source. You have a GitHub, you can submit your ideas. If the most of a society of a technical experts reject the idea, it doesn't mean what you still should push your idea. Maybe it has a lot of minuses. Just think about another one. So the majority of the technical experts, of engineers, they are trying to choose the most affordable and most safe solution. It's like building the rocket, so it should fly. And most of the people, they like to improve the Bitcoin. It's not about the destroying the Bitcoin. This is why we are so thinking about what they are doing and how we are doing. They are trying to choose the most safe way how to improve a Bitcoin.
Roger, what are the importance of nodes in Bitcoin to you?
So the importance of nodes in Bitcoin to me is to provide the redundancy in the blockchain, right? So like the more copies of the blockchain there are floating around the world, the harder it is for anybody to go and say, oh, here's some fake copy of the blockchain that undoes certain transactions or does whatever. Everybody else can say, no, there's thousands of copies of the real copy of the blockchain. That's not the right one. And all the miners and everybody else are all validating against it. So the more copies of the blockchain floating around in the world, the more difficult it is for anybody to censor Bitcoin, and the more choices that all these people that are running SPV wallets have as far as choosing which full node to connect to around the world. So the more full nodes, the better. But we don't need 100% of people using Bitcoin to be running a full node either. That's just silly and pointless.
Eric, does the block size affect the ability for clients to run full nodes?
Well, of course. I mean, it requires more resources, and anything that increases, resource cost is going to probably, put economic pressure downwards on that. I do think that today's computers could handle bigger blocks, and SegWit is going to be dealing with bigger blocks. So I wouldn't have supported SegWit if I didn't feel like computers were capable of supporting it, and that if I felt like nodes were going to be dropping off. But yeah, I mean, the more that we raise resource requirements, the more expensive it becomes to run a node. The less the people are going to run nodes, the more that we introduce the potential for either people just not like there could be some validation error that just like goes under people's noses. There could be issues with people just not being aware of exactly like if people are not validating their own transactions, then miners could basically insert stuff in there, and it could be like totally invalid transactions. Users are not going to know the difference, right? Right now, the incentives are definitely not for that, but a huge check on that, on the power of miners, is full nodes, is users just running nodes and businesses running nodes to make sure that the miners are actually mining blocks that are valid. If you just trust the miners to validate the blocks, then first of all, even if miners didn't intentionally want to cause problems, there's already been issues in the past where miners were running buggy code that created invalid blocks, right? So users are going to get confirmations for transactions that actually are, the blocks that are not valid. And secondly, like it leads to all sorts of kind of if you look at the game theory analysis of different miners kind of colluding or like, fighting or like competing with each other, there could be potential issues there with miners being able to do stuff that will go under the rest of the users' noses. So it's very important that we have a lot of full nodes on in the network to be able to make sure that everything is that everything is valid, and that's really what what puts a check on the network and makes sure that the coins that people are buying and selling actually follow the rules that everyone agreed to.
Phil?
The one experiment I don't want to do with the Bitcoin network is experiment with fewer and fewer and fewer fully validating nodes. and it's already a pain in the ass. All right, and I think that if we're not careful, we could make running a full node become expensive, uh, high bandwidth, and increasingly centralized, right? If people might say, well, companies might say, okay, we'll run some full nodes, we'll just do it up in the cloud, and all of a sudden you have Amazon running quarter your nodes. So I think that no diversity, I think, makes sense. And one problem that we have in Bitcoin is that we have no way of incentivizing the nodes that are relaying the transactions, and that are serving up the historical blockchain to new nodes. And I think I don't see a way to solve that except to just tread very carefully upon raising the requirements on operating a node. And I think that when we look at the block size issue, I think that there's two considerations. There's a question of the amount of data that cumulatively you're dealing with, but it's also bandwidth constraints. And I think one of the problems with the bandwidth issues are, there's the brute force method, is just when a block gets mined, you just push it around, and you have this huge spike in activity, which doesn't work for a lot of people with that have asymmetric download and upload speeds and other kinds of issues where their network is not being used efficiently. Much better that we made many strides toward this to make that network utilization much more even, much more efficient, so that when we do increase the block size, we're not going to be bludgeoning people that are that don't enjoy the near free bandwidth that most of us in major metropolitan areas in the United States or Europe enjoy, because I think we want Bitcoin to proliferate around the world. I think that keeping node costs down matters.
Okay, so we're all traders here. One second, I want to bring up an open related question, because I mean we're all traders here, and so in the past, last year there was this we were trapped in this range of between about $200 to $300 on Bitcoin price, and that's when the debate over block size and scaling really started to get heated, and there was a lot of people making points about, well, the price is stagnant because we are not scaling and this and that, and then since then price has gone up 3 times. So since all the Bitcoin XT classic stuff was really getting going. Generally,
when my
I just want to make an open question then for in general, is what do you guys think relevance of the market price of Bitcoin is in signaling the sort of appropriateness of what scaling solution should be used?
Roger, you want to take that?
Sure. If you guys are traders, I'm sure you know, there's 1,000,001 different things that's affecting the market at any one time. So we can speculate as to what some of the major contributing factors are, but it's really hard to know. But I think one of the main things that's caused the price to go up is just the fact that more people are using Bitcoin around the world. The more people that use Bitcoin, the more useful it becomes, and the more people that'll want to hold it. And because the supply is limited, that means the price in terms of dollars or yen or whatever, it's going to go up. And I think that's a good chunk of what it is. And I think a lot of the people that are using Bitcoin on a daily basis are kind of completely unaware of the scaling debate that's been going on with the people that are involved in Bitcoin day in and day out as their career.
Roger, do you think it's important? Hold on a second. Do you think it's important for nodes to be able to run behind Tor?
Yeah, I think it's better if nodes can run behind Tor than not. One thing I'd love to ask everybody else on the panel here, I've been thinking about it for a while, and I think it's the absolute number of full nodes that count, not the percentage of people that are running full nodes. And I'd like to hear if people agree or disagree, and why or why not. And obviously there's a couple of caveats, like if all the full nodes are running in one Amazon data center, that doesn't really count. But assuming they're distributed around, I think it's the percentage of, it's the absolute number of full nodes, not the percentage that counts.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think it is the number of nodes, and I think you have to weight that against sort of sort of location diversity through looking at the first couple of octets on the IP address. But
Well,
yeah,
don't forget that nodes also provide relay services, and if you don't have enough nodes to be able to relay to all the different clients, then that's also a problem.
right. But I think
Yeah,
his
exactly.
point is it's not about not about maintaining number of nodes. Doesn't have to be like a constant percentage of number of users, or anything like that. I think it's just, is 5,000 nodes enough? I think 10,000 nodes is better. But I think geographic diversity and provider diversity is important. I think it's really important. And
Connectivity. Also
connectivity.
connectivity. The channels, they should be fast enough, because the wider each channel, the more transactions you will be able also to process, and the number of full nodes, it's also ability of a network to process more transactions. If you would like to increase the number of transactions, you should also increase the number of nodes. If you're keeping the number of nodes too high, or if you're increasing the cost of running full nodes a lot, it will also increase the transaction fee cost, because it's practically the operational cost of running the Bitcoin network. It's very, very simple. And this is, again, if you're increasing the physical block size just for a heat, without any smart approaches, without any compact blocks, it's increasing the requirements for each node. The bandwidth channel will be requirements will be higher. The disk storage requirements will be higher, and for processing more transactions, the fee for just sending the transaction will be also higher, because it's operational cost.
Roger, how do you think we can connect better with China?
If I can add one last thing to the full node discussion, though, too, I think it's worth pointing out. So let's say, just for a thought experiment here, let's say that the block size were to be instantly doubled overnight. I'm sorry, instantly sent to 10 megabytes overnight. So now the Bitcoin network can handle 10 times more transactions than it can today. Even if only half the percentage of people that are running full nodes today are still running full nodes with 10 megabyte blocks, you still have a much, much, much greater number of full nodes around the world. So I think it's important to realize that one great way to have more full nodes around the world is to get more people involved in Bitcoin. And I'm sorry, what was the actual question?
Well, welcome back to that. Eric, can you respond to what Roger just said?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. I mean, can you point out what you want me to comment on?
The short version is that more people using Bitcoin around the world, and more businesses and more everything involved around Bitcoin, will mean more full nodes around the world.
I think that that's true to an extent. I think that the incentive structure needs to be correct. I think that in the early days of Bitcoin, the incentive structure was right for people to want to run nodes. At the very beginning, nodes were also mining, so you could mine on your CPU. Everyone was running Bitcoin, on their laptop, and they could that was an incentive. Obviously, that's no longer the case. People now have other incentives to run full nodes. I think that if we have more people in the world using it for consumer applications or point of sale or stuff like that, that doesn't necessarily imply that people are just going to automatically want to run nodes, though. Because I think that at the very beginning of Bitcoin, in the very early stages, most of the people were enthusiasts and hobbyists, and people that really wanted to support the network. I think that as it becomes more mass consumer type of more of a mass consumer type network, unless there's actual economic incentives for people to run the nodes, unless people can actually make money doing it, really, I think that you kind of reach this, it's kind of like the tragedy of the commons. It's people kind of rely on others to validate for them without having to put up any of the cost, and I think that the more expensive it is to run a node, the more we're going to see that.
Phil, would you comment on that and also link that to price?
So, I think that, how users feel about about Bitcoin and the price, and and people looking to see whether or not price is signaling, people favoring one solution versus another. I just, as somebody who runs an exchange, I see the flows. I talk to my customers every day. I can tell you that the price of Bitcoin could easily go to the moon without any scaling. Okay. And that's because Bitcoin already has a killer app, and that is digital store of value. It's gold 2.0, right? And frankly, people who are actually using it to store significant amounts of value really don't care about having to pay a higher fee to move $1,000, $10,000, $20,000. But I think so. So as a result, I think that anybody that's looking at the price and trying to correlate it with, say, SegWit adoption or whatever, I think that's a red herring. I think that anybody's trying to look at that or trying to read the tea leaves on what the market thinks or what the market wants, I think that's a fool's errand.
All right, Phil, I want to ask you, and then I want to ask Eric the same question. What do you think we can do to connect better with China?
Well, I mean, I think that. I mean, are we talking about core connecting better with China? Are we talking about connectivity wise? I mean, I think you can, or are we talking about in a more sort of meta sense? I mean, I definitely think that core, or people in core need to do a better job of communicating with the mining community in China. I think that's definitely really important. And then on this more of the more literal interpretation of the question, the fact that this Great Firewall of China exists does create a problem with mining, because the miners within China are able to communicate with one another very quickly, and they can do block propagation amongst one another quickly. So somebody can mine a block, and then a lot of guys, there's a lot of validation of this mining going on over there, where people are just, one miner is just basically mining off the header of another block that some other miner came up there. They're not even bothering to validate, and just because they want to be able to immediately put together the next block and start mining. Maybe Ant Pool is validating, and that's why they mine a lot of empty blocks, because in that instance where while they're validating, while they're building the block to that they want to validate, may call it 30 seconds a minute, maybe they end up mining, they'll mine an empty block in the meantime, which is why you see most empty blocks happen right after a block gets mined. But the fact that to communicate through that firewall into China, if you're mining outside of China, there's a significant problem there.
Can you comment on that, Roger?
Yeah, I'd actually I agree with I think everything he said in regards to China, but I'd like to back up to one other point that Phil made, and I'd like to disagree pretty strongly. So he said he thinks Bitcoin can go to the moon just because people are using it as a store of value. But I think if you look at it, and if you look at any other store of value in the entire world, the reason that people are using, to some extent, Bitcoin as a store of value today is because it's also being used as a medium of exchange. And if it's not able to be used as a medium of exchange first, it will never be used as a store of value. So if you look at all these stores of values around the world, all of them were previously used as a medium of exchange. And Bitcoin, it's being used as a medium of exchange to some degree today, but I think that it needs to really be used a whole lot more as a medium of exchange before it can be expected to become a long-term store of value for people to use all over the world. So I don't think it can jump directly to being digital gold 2.0 if it's not used as a medium of exchange first, just like gold was. Gold was widely used as a medium of exchange before it became a store of value.
No. Well, let's look at monetary history, though. Gold was used as a medium of exchange, but principally as a settlement layer, and silver was the money of the hoi polloi. Like that was the money that was changing hands. So it could very well be that if you want to buy coffee, or if you want to do a microtransaction, or you want to pay for 10 cents to read an article online, it could very well be that you end up having to use some other blockchain or cryptocurrency that's specifically designed for that sort of thing, because Bitcoin never gets SegWit activated, and Lightning Networks never happens, and I mean, that could very well be. And yet at the same time, the fact that no hard fork ever happened with Bitcoin, or this, that, and the other, could go a long way to proving kind of Bitcoin's sort of immutability, not just from a standpoint of its ledger, but its consensus rules, and that itself could lend a lot of value. I agree, Roger. It could be so much more. Bitcoin could be so much more. Should be so much more. But if it doesn't become that, it still could be, the price still could go up very dramatically. Perhaps not as dramatically as it could, but
I guess maybe where we can agree on this is that the odds of it being used as a store of value are much, 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 much higher if it's also able to be used widely as a medium of exchange.
I don't think it's much, much higher. Maybe we can disagree on that. Maybe you think it's an order of magnitude higher, and I think, yeah, maybe there's a correlation, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think that it's already found that store of value thing. And you made the comment early on about, there's no currency in history has ever become a store of value unless it was a medium of exchange. I'm not sure. I've heard you say that before. I'm not sure that that's really true. But
And even if you look at the different fiat currencies around the world, all of them have their origin in some sort of precious metal or commodity or something that was actually had some utility to begin with, and then later it just became government issued pieces of paper, including the U.S. dollar.
yeah, and that's fine, and that's why. Look, but we had silver and we had gold. I'm just, and I'm not sure that Bitcoin. I don't think it may be too risky. I guess to come back to to a dev point here, it may be too risky to try to make Bitcoin to be all things to all people. And at least to do that in a time frame that the market seems to demand. It may be the safer solution is to have multiple blockchains at the end of the day. I'm not necessarily advocating that position, but I mean, I think that's a reasonable way to think about it as a possible outcome.
How does second
Yeah,
layer play into
that's-
that? How does
And
second layer
if
play
I
into
can
that?
add one final thing, actually, and I agree that that's something worth considering, Phil, and I'll give that some more thought. And I'm sorry, guys, I have to drop off the call now, but I'd be more than happy to have a second edition at some point in the near future. I found this really enjoyable, and I hope you guys did as well.
Indeed, have a good evening.
Yeah.
We did too, Raj.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
We did
Roger.
it.
Thanks, guys. See
Roger.
you next time.
Go ahead,
Next
Alex.
time. So there are really great point what the Philip was mentioned. So talking about the silver and gold. So in my opinion, the Bitcoin is really the gold, and what will become a silver? It's a question. It can be Lightning, or it can be another one, blockchain, Lightning, maybe.
Lightning is sort of
so
like paper
light-
money, isn't it?
Come on, Litecoin, baby. Litecoin.
Litecoin,
Litecoin, you
exactly.
mean? Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, Philip, you catch my point. But the Lightning can also make the create a bridge between the Bitcoin and Litecoin, and this can create exactly the economy for fast payments and for storage payment, for keeping the cost like in gold, and for processing the small payment using the Litecoins.
Yeah, I mean that
And
is in many
it-
ways how the old economic system worked for hundreds of years.
Yeah, but it's exactly, if you're building a lot of possibilities, then the economy will find a better way how to optimize it. And once again, then when we are talking about the full nodes, so if you're decreasing the operational cost of whole network, it's meaning the lower fee, and it's meaning also the transaction cost will be lower. And why Bitcoin right now is not used? Because the requirements for full nodes is high, the operational cost of the network is higher, and if you're trying to send the money using the regular way, using the cash or using the bank transfer, the price is more optimal. So if you're optimizing, it's technically, it's exactly about decreasing the cost. And also about the mining, it's also was just about the optimizing the operational cost. Optimizing the operational cost, you're making the more affordable environment for transfers. That's easy.
I had one quick question. Would SegWit cause any issues with future hard forks? And if not, what do you think the reason or the rationale is not to do? Let's say you really like hard forks, you do SegWit first, and then you think about the hard fork after. It kind of seems like, SegWit might delay it. Is there any validity?
Well, first of all, we have no way of deploying a hard fork right now. There's no way that we know to do it safely, whereas SegWit is something that can be deployed right now, that has been deployed
Right.
and can be activated. But assuming that we could do hard forks safely, which is a very big if. Right now, SegWit increases the block size in a way where it encourages the reduction of like the UTXO set, for instance, which means that it reduces the memory requirements of nodes. So you know we're trying to optimize some other
That is
resource
an
to be.
excellent point,
Yeah.
Eric. Excellent point. You
Yeah.
got to drive that one home. I've
I
totally
get I
forgot to
get
bring that
that.
up.
I'm saying SegWit goes through, and then people think about hard forks after. If you're, you know, if you're one of these hard fork proponents, if SegWit goes through, does that cause any issue for you to do that in 6 months? Like, let's say that person still thinks in their head, yes, we could hard fork.
Well,
SegWit
they
goes
can
through.
hard fork. I mean, they can hard fork right now if they want. Anyone can hard fork if they want. Like the code base is right there. Anyone can take it and run with it. And like if they can get enough people to accept their version of the coin, then that's power to them. But
Or
it's
you could
just
do what Douglas did with Clam, for example. That's
Okay,
technically
good.
a hard fork, a
but
fork of Bitcoin.
Well, I understand that, but it seems like people think, oh, if SegWit goes through, it reduces the ability for someone to hard fork later,
No,
and
no.
I don't think
No,
it does.
no, it stays the same. It's the same. We have the same problems, the same exact issues that we face right now with hard forks. We'd face after SegWit. It doesn't change anything.
I want to come back to a
yeah,
point that Eric made just a moment ago, and I want to make sure everybody understands this. SegWit, the economic incentives created by SegWit, incentivizes a smaller UTXO set. And that's a very subtle point, but really important because that does drop the cost of running a node. It'll have a big impact. Nodes will run faster. They'll be less expensive to run. And I think that's really important, an important point.
yeah,
Yeah, but I think
and
the bigger point here is
what
that we really, even if we could do a hard fork, I think that the issue as far as like if we could just increase other constraints. I mean, we could change any parameters at any time with a hard fork because a hard fork could basically change anything or redesign the whole system from scratch. I think that trying to think that something will prevent a hard fork from being practical. I think that the reasons that hard forks are impractical have nothing to do with SegWit or any other soft fork.
I think
Right.
a better question
Yep.
would be what is the inherent risk in SegWit versus other hard forks? Like, how risky is SegWit if something were to go wrong with the incentive structure, like post deployment? How bad is that?
Well, I mean, it's been very, very well tested. Soft forks have been deployed numerous times on Bitcoin already without any serious incident. I think that it's pretty well looked at code base. A lot of eyeballs have gone through that. Tons of peer review. A lot of application developers have already started working on applications on it and working on testnet with things. And everything seems to be working well. And there's good theory behind it. There's good solid theory that says that this is a good, a stable way of deploying something that's not going to lead to the network fragmenting. We don't have anything like that, anything even close to that with hard forks. Hard forks are basically like completely like all bets are off. Like there's no theory behind how to make that happen safely.
Okay, is it true that SegWit actually exists on Litecoin? And if so, like, would you actually like to see SegWit functioning in the wild on another altcoin before Bitcoin, a multi-billion-dollar economy?
Well, I'd prefer it to to activate on Bitcoin first, but if it doesn't, then I'm pretty sure that other coins are going to incorporate it because especially coins like Litecoin that have a very similar code base. I don't believe that SegWit has been merged in yet, but
It almost is. I
it
think
almost is, yeah.
yeah.
So it's pretty close to being merged in, and I think that it's got the same activation mechanism. So yeah, it's
But
possible that it does activate.
I promise you, it will activate before Bitcoin.
What's your worry on Litecoin activating before Bitcoin? Like, I really don't see any problem with that. Are you worried that Litecoin could, potentially have these tools and benefits that Bitcoin doesn't?
No, not really. I mean, I think that it'd be great if it. I mean, I'd be happy if it activates on Litecoin. I'm just saying that it'd be nice to see it activate on Bitcoin. But if it happens on Litecoin first, fine. I don't really have a problem with that.
Yeah, sure. And let Lightning, experiment there too. Look, I'm not here to shill for any other crypto really, but the reality is that we're just not going to be able to do all the transactions that everybody demands on Bitcoin, at least the way it is today. And if it's if these technologies can be tested on other blockchains, or God forbid, if we ever have functional side chains, that's a great place to test stuff theoretically. Um, then that we should be doing that. I mean, there's why not? I mean, testnet isn't really live, and the best tests of all are the ones where you do things on a sort of limited basis, but with but in a live production environment.
Agree. Absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
Shinobi, are you out there?
I'm here.
Go ahead.
Well, my major point was to Roger for the most part, but I was going to try and point out he is essentially arguing that Bitcoin has to transmit value before it can store value. But in order for you to transmit value with Bitcoin, first you have to agree on a copy of the ledger. And isn't simply agreeing on the copy of the ledger and the rules how it stores value? And doesn't that necessarily demonstrate that it not only has to have a store of value function first, but it in fact does?
Well, I think that there is definitely a circular argument here, and I think that his theory of something needs to be a medium of exchange before it can be a store of value, um, if you look at that on the Bitcoin standpoint, it is somewhat problematic because the presumption, his argument principally, is that Bitcoin needs to be a widespread medium of exchange, something that everybody can use, and that through that network effect, it will become a store of value. But the problem is that in order for everybody to be able to use it, you really need, nodes need to be cheap and easy to run. But the more people are using it for sort of like small transactions, the higher the requirement for the requirements for running those nodes. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg problem. And I don't think you can ever really get to store value the way he thinks we need to get there. I think it's the opposite other way around. I think that things are considered a store of value, and then they themselves may in turn be used as a medium of exchange. I think that's really more the way it really works. Um, And, like I said, I think, there's a lot of people during the sort of VC boom era a couple years ago with Bitcoin. There's all this talk about trying to find Bitcoin's killer app, the killer app, the killer app. Oh, it's going to be merchant adoption, or it's going to be micropayments. Oh, it's going to be remittances. It's going to be, I don't know, XYZ business model. Many of which are all struggling, right? All of these things are struggling. And some people say, oh, it's because of core. Oh, it's the block size. No, it's just because Bitcoin already has its killer app. Its killer app is fucking digital gold. That's what it is, and we don't, frankly, for that to succeed, we don't really need the kind of scale, the risky scaling that some people are advocating. We just don't.
I asked Samson Mao what he thought the killer app of Bitcoin was, and he said global economic collapse. Like he was
That's so
completely
great. That's such a great comment.
he wasn't trolling like on the call. He was
No, he's
serious.
not. Hey, if
He said
any of you guys
Bitcoin is
read James Rickards' books, you should read them. And
Well,
then you'll feel differently.
Yeah, Mal might be right. Not even kidding.
well.
Pulitzer
He was
Bitcoin.
just matter of fact. Like Bitcoin is already doing what it needs to do. We just need everything else to fail. If that happens, then Bitcoin will be the killer app.
Yeah, that's what I'm